Happy Thursday to everyone joining us. I saw there were a couple of you waiting. I appreciate the loyalty. Natasha will not be joining us this evening. She's under the weather, so we're all going to send her well wishes and hope that she feels better soon. I had the pleasure of hosting GSA earlier this week. GSA Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, the Small Business Specialist, presented a fantastic webinar for us at the South Carolina Apex Accelerator regarding GSA schedules. And GSA schedule is a type of contract vehicle, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So I thought this was a perfectly timed topic. So first of all, I want to explain sort of what these contract vehicles are, right? So you have multiple different ways that you can be awarded a contract, and the government has different types of contract awards. So, what most of us are used to seeing on SAM are, the kind of short term, maybe up to a year as far as a solicitation, but it's something the government buys over and over and over, and the agency knows they're going to need it. Most of the time, instead of doing these one-off contracts, they're going to do a longer term acquisition, and those can come in multiple different forms. So we're going to talk about some of those here today. Now, if you are watching this, hopefully you are joining us on YouTube. I know I had some issues with our streaming last week, so I'm hoping we're in the group, but I'm not entirely certain if we're streaming everywhere today. So at the very least, if you can see this, join us on YouTube, jump into the conversation. So the first type of vehicle, there's different types of vehicles, and things that are commonly bought on these long-term contracts are IT services, building maintenance, staffing, administrative support, right? So I did a little bit of homework, and I'd like to share that with you guys today, because I'm going to teach you sort of where you can find this vehicle spending. There are multiple different types, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But first, I'd like to kind of show you, this is one of my favorite tools on USA spending. And hopefully everyone can see this screen here. But what I did here is I just did a quick search. I was interested just in the last 3 years, just kind of seeing what's out there right now. And I selected only contract IDVs. IDV stands for Indefinite Delivery Vehicle. And I selected, I wanted to see basically what was being purchased from a vehicle. And this is sort of in the last 3 years, what the government has purchased through one of these long-term contracts. So we've got pharmaceutical prep manufacturing. I'm sure that had to do with the COVID-19 vaccines. We've got R&D, non-scheduled chartered air freight transportation, medicinal, botanical. I thought this was interesting. Facility support services is more and more being procured through the contract vehicles, as I did learn earlier this week from GSA that facilities maintenance is one of the areas that they are purchasing from on GSA facilities maintenance. So underneath that, we've got some remediation, R&D again, computer systems design services. So here's where we're getting into the IT. We're talking 1.2 billion in spend in the last 3 years. Engineering services, and we can of course click next and go on. Now, keeping in mind industry codes are just that, industry. They don't actually depict what it is that you do. So if we wanted to drill a little deeper, we can look at the product service codes. Now, there are different types of contract vehicles, and that is what I want to kind of explain. You have your GSA schedules, which if the government can purchase from a GSA schedule after they've performed their market research, typically they're going to put that through GSA. And I have a lot of contractors asking me, where are all the solicitations for things like transportation and IT? Well, fact of the matter is because those are available on a GSA schedule, 9 times out of 10, those solicitations are more than likely going to come down through eBuy. So only the GSA schedule holders that currently are approved on a schedule will have access to those solicitations. There are other vehicles, some of which you may have heard of. There are IDIQs, which stands for indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. And that's a type of contract where government knows they need a certain type, a product or service, but the quantities, delivery times, they don't really know how much or when. So the IDIQs really establish the terms, the conditions, and negotiate the pricing that will be paid over the first, and typically they're awarded like a base option, or a base year plus 4 option years, totaling 5. NASA Soup is kind of an exception to that rule, where that contract went on for 10 years. So key features of an IDIQ, they do accommodate changing requirements over time. Usually includes a minimum order quantity. There is a ceiling, so they'll kind of determine throughout the length of the contract how much money they're planning on spending through that contract. And they could be single or multiple awards. So my mentor, when I was first kind of starting in this industry, it was all completely foreign to me. And I'm going to give you the same analogy that he gave me that kind of made me go, oh, all right. So the analogy is, think of an IDIQ like a baseball team, right? You have baseball tryouts. Only so many players are going to get to start, right? And the rest of them are going to sit on the bench for the rest of the season. So once you win or are awarded a multiple award IDIQ, you're still in competition with the other incumbents on that IDIQ. So leveraging your differentiators really does become important once you onboard. Something else that's very common with, for example, the NASA Soup 6, which is coming around for recompetition, I believe 2025, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. In order to be awarded a seat as prime contractor on that contract vehicle, you actually already have to have past performance as a subcontractor for a prime on NASA Soup. So if those of you who are in IT, you do not have federal past performance, you've not worked as a subcontractor on Soup, start there. The contract information and all of the contact information for the incumbents is publicly available on the Soup website. So you kind of have a lot of your work done for you. The next type I want to talk about is a government-wide acquisition contract, which is a type of IDIQ essentially. But it does allow multiple agencies to access those pre-vetted contractors for a wide range of IT solutions and services. So the NASA Soup is a GWAC, which is a type of IDIQ. And I've heard over and over again from a lot of gubbies that the reason they like NASA Soup so much is because it's literally the quickest way to buy IT. So key features include leveraging the GWAC rather than running the full procurement yourself, especially if you have a contracting officer who may not be privy to the tech requirements. It would be very difficult and costly for the government to use one-off contracts every time they wanted to purchase IT services, with some of the complexities involved, especially when we get into cybersecurity. There are also blanket purchase agreements. So BPAs, they're basically a simplified agreement with established terms, pre-negotiated pricing as well, and they're really used for repetitive purchases. We actually have a group member who won recently a 5-year base one for option years, and that contract, items will be procured over it for the duration of that contract. So they tend to be focused more on very specific goods or services, something the agency knows that they're going to be buying, something they know that they're going to be needing. and usually also when they have a clear understanding of the needs. So, for those well-defined products, not necessarily used very often for IT services, certainly not that I've seen. Now, the GSA schedule, that is essentially also a type of IDIQ, right? Because it's a 5-year, could be 10-year contract where your terms and your pricing are pre-negotiated. And essentially, getting the contract award on the GSA schedule or the IDIQ or GWAC, if there are, competitors, essentially, you're not the only one with the GSA schedule. So it's really important to know who your competitors are. And one of the beautiful things about GSA schedules is when you are awarded a schedule, your terms, your conditions, and your pricing becomes public information. So for that, I am going to share my screen again, and we're going to take a little detour into GSA eLibrary. This is one of my favorite tools, and I use it even when, I've kind of found what I'm looking for in USA spending, or if I'm just trying to understand more about an industry, I'll go into eLibrary. Anyone in the audience, give me a service that you are interested in. Is there anybody watching that wants to know more about how to use eLibrary for their industry? Let's go with facilities maintenance, since that seems to be a new schedule. Whoops, probably not the right keyword. See what facility, here we go. See what comes up. Now you can also use these, and these are your category guides. You have your facilities, human capital, IT, office management, scientific management solutions, transportation and logistics. So all of you guys, they're like, hey, where's all the transportation contracts? Well, you're not looking in the right place. Furniture and furnishings, industrial products and services, miscellaneous, professional services, security and protection, and travel. I see someone says program management. So program management could fall under various areas. What kind of program management? Because if we're talking about acquisition program management, that's probably not going to be purchased on a GSA schedule, and I'd have to go back to USA spending for that. But let's take a look at, IT is my favorite, but I don't want to be selfish. Human capital. All right, Alex, let's go with that. So we've got your background investigations, compensation and benefits, human resources, and social services. I'm gonna go with, let's just say background investigations. All right. So the category for that schedule is 561611. Here's the description of the schedule. And if I click on it there, it's going to tell me all of the schedule holders. Now, this doesn't necessarily tell me, whether or not their schedule is making money. This just tells me that they have it, right? So moving down here, we know CACI gets a lot of business. So just to kind of show you what you can expect to find about a contractor in this system, obviously the contact information, the schedules that they have. Now, not only does CACI have a multiple word schedule, but they're also on the Alliant 2. And what the Alliant 2 is more or less a large IDIQ, or indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, multiple incumbents. So the contractors are kind of competing against each other, even as after they receive the award. And their contractor terms and conditions and public price list. So let's go ahead and see, because the mass is more attainable for most of our audience than the Alliant 2. To get on the Alliant, you've got to jump through multiple hoops, including already have a GSA schedule. So let's just take a look at CACI's. And this is sort of the information that gets entered into eOffer when you get on a schedule. They've got quite a few things that they're offering on their schedule. And let me try to blow this up a little bit for you guys. Here are all of the areas that they support within 561-611 schedule. Here are all of the labor categories that they support. And if you guys are trying to figure out what you are able to charge for one specific labor category or another, that information can be found on GSA Calc. And if there's any interest, we can go over, run through that too if we have enough time. All right, so it tells you what their minimum order is, and all of these are answers, in the e-offer system that you would essentially put in terms and conditions. And the templates, guys, I will say the hardest part about a GSA schedule, even for me, is keeping all the templates straight, because there's at least now one solicitation instead of a dozen. There's one mass solicitation under the new category management. And the mass solicitation, has like everything inside of it. And there is a separate page that you have to go to download all of your templates that are relevant for your category. So this has not traditionally been one of my strongest areas of government contracting. I'm a federal sales strategist. However, as the GSA schedule gains, it's very popular among, the IT space for contractors who are unable to onboard onto something like NASA Suite or VETS 2, or maybe you don't qualify for CIO SP3 or 4 yet, so their GSA schedule can be a vehicle that you would have access to rather immediately, rather than waiting for these long-term IDIQs to come back to be recompeted again. So that's just an example. You can see these things get pretty extensive. I don't want to spend too much time on there, but you'll also see that under their multiple award schedule, they've also got a dozen other categories too. So these are kind of separate in essence, and the categories are, this is the overall SIN, and then this is order level management, to allow you to be able to bill for incidentals against that SIN. So there's a lot of information that you can find in here, but essentially if you want to figure out if a GSA schedule is going to be profitable for you, I always start here and reverse engineer. So let's kind of walk through that process so that those of you who are watching at home and maybe are trying to figure out, where are the solicitations? How can I access some of this money? Let's do one that someone popped in. We're going to do program management. And I'm just going to select the most recent fiscal years for this particular use case. And I'm only interested in contracts and IDVs as well. Location, we can always isolate the location if we are uninterested in overseas. I want to do all states in the United States. And we'll go ahead and click submit. Now, let me kind of show you how to interpret this information, because it doesn't really mean a whole lot if you don't know how to use it. The keyword program management pulled up 17,000 transactions. Those transactions were in part accounted for 2,937 indefinite delivery vehicles. We cannot tell yet which vehicles those were, what types of vehicles, but we can tell who's doing the buying. These are the agencies and your sub-agencies. So when you want to know who it is that you're targeting, essentially this is where you'll find that information. As far as the industry code, this is the primary product service code that should be listed literally everywhere. Your SAM, your capability statement. That is the most commonly used code, and that counts for over 13 billion just in the last, say, roughly 18 months. And then in second place, we have R499, engineering technical, and it goes on from there. What I am interested, though, in seeing more is how were these procured? We can see a little bit of a sneak peek of how, but it doesn't really give us enough information. So there are a couple definitive contracts in there. There are a couple delivery orders, which, could be multiple from multiple sources. So the way that we find out is we want to download this report, everything. And I mean, this thing, there's like over 100 columns. So we're not going to dig into the weeds today, and hopefully this search will cooperate with me. But once that downloads, I'm going to show you one very important table. And I know by now that if you guys have been registered in SAM for any period of time, you are probably getting inundated with third-party calls, emails, even postcards sometimes telling you, you need a GSA schedule to do business with the government. That's not always true. That's because someone has a vested interest to sell you something. So the way that we confirm whether or not a GSA schedule makes sense for us, and for those of you who may be just joining, if you are, this use case is for program management. So give this a moment here. And while we're waiting for that, do we have any questions from the audience so far? Angela, is that you? I recognize the last name, but you may be joining from someone else's account. I'm not sure. All right. Sometimes I feel like the Jeopardy song should be playing in the background when I try to download these reports. Now, this is kind of a big one, so it might take a few minutes. And hopefully it doesn't cause my whole machine to freeze. But essentially what we're looking for in here is we want to isolate the parent award type. And we want to look at the spend and which parent award, those dollars are going through. And we could get a little deeper and isolate by set aside too. If I'm an 8A, or if I am a woman-owned small business or a veteran-owned small business, I would also then sort of filter down to make sure that I know for a specific set aside which contract vehicle would make the most sense and provide me the most opportunity. So while that is downloading, we can sort of wait for that, but we do have a question. Alex, I see your question. Can you talk a bit about the springboard? Yeah, so this is rather new, and I did come across that. So the Springboard program is a program that GSA started specifically for IT companies. And the Springboard is essentially designed to allow you to kind of fast track right, through schedule processing. There were a lot of details that were provided in the GSA course or the webinar that we had done earlier this week on the Springboard. And this is not actually, I think this is an older page, so bear with me a second. Here we go. I think this might, yeah. All right, so they used to call it Springboard, and I meant to confirm with Paula if Springboard is now Fastlane. But these are essentially for IT contractors. You'll notice here that you have to be a multiple award offer or existing schedule holder to be, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. Yeah, Fastlane eligibility is, I guess, for modifications. Oh, I guess that was the right page then. Here's Fastlane. Okay. That's not it. There's not very much information out here, surprisingly enough, about the Springboard. And this is so dated. They used to call the schedule, the IT schedule 70, before category management took over. So I'm just hesitant that the information that's available here or on the previous page that we looked at is actually legitimate. But we can certainly maybe focus an episode on that once I'm able to get a little bit more details available. I see our data download has just become available. So let's open that up and I'm going to show you how to figure out if or which type of contract vehicle is relevant in your industry. And I'm getting the spinning wheel of death here. Bear with me. There we go. So when you download this report, you're going to see your prime award and your sub award. So you can actually see the subcontractors and which primes are using them. We're, for this use case, going to use the prime award summaries. And my computer is running incredibly slow. All right, we're going to convert that. Put this over here for you guys. Save that as an Excel workbook. And this is our program management example. All right, so we're going to save that guy. And then we're going to pull him up. All right, now this is the raw data. This is how many columns there are. This does get entered at contract closeout. So don't expect you to know what all of those mean. That's for data nerds like me. All right, so we're just going to run a quick pivot table here. I'm going to show you exactly how to figure out. I like to do 3 columns in total. I like the total obligated amount, the number of actions, and we need the parent award type. All right. So this middle column here represents the dollar amount. The far right column represents the number of actions, and then we're going to sort from largest to smallest. All right. Let me show you what this means here. We get rid of these. All right. Why that looks funky. But blank, when we see blank, that accounts for the purchases that were either left blank at the time of contract closeout or it just went, to regular old SAM or was procured by means other than a GWAC, IDIQ, Federal Supply Schedule, BPA, or BOA. So your IDC, you have your indefinite delivery contract, which is basically your IDIQ. That accounts for most of the project management spending. And I'm also actually quite surprised that there were a total of 8,000 of them that went through that IDC. So the downside of USA spending is that we can't figure out which IDC that is via the system. But here is your GSA schedule spending. So there was a considerable amount that went through a federal supply schedule. That's what that acronym is. And then you have your BPA, your blanket purchase agreement, GWAC, government-wide acquisition contract, and your blanket ordering agreement in last place. If I were a new small business, I would be hitting the primes that are winning here. We're going to go with recipient name, and there they are. Like that. Let's go ahead and sort. All right, so this is our dollar column. Now I know exactly which prime won how much via which means. So here's our CACI again. They have an indefinite delivery contract and a GSA schedule. So they've got 2 vehicles that will cover. And here's their federal supply schedule spending. So you can kind of see as you grow, and you onboard onto various different vehicles and build your past performance, more opportunities essentially open up to you. And we are almost out of time, guys. Does anyone else have any last questions, thoughts, etc.? And thank you, Alex, for joining me in the YouTube chat. I would have been all alone here had it not been for you. I will make sure that I put on the schedule a specific episode about the springboard. I'm also going to be meeting with Paula Mensa in regards to that springboard for my own self. So I very much look forward to providing that information to you. Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate all of you being here this evening. Please do feel free to look in the description. We have a link in the description to submit your questions to us. That way we can fill up the schedule with more episodes on topics that you care about and help you overcome your challenges in government contracting. I am going to close out for this evening. Thank you all. And I'm trying to fix that IT issue of Alex. I got to tell you, this streaming software is not my thing, but I appreciate everybody's patience with me. Have a great night.